I'm sorry, don't look for me, my husband said before hanging up. No matter how many times I called back, he wouldn't answer. After giving birth, I returned from the hospital with my baby only to find our home locked. When I finally reached my husband, who was supposed to pick us up, he said, "I'm tired, I sold the house, and don't look for me." Rather than wondering, how did this happen, my mind was consumed with the question of, what should I do to protect the tiny life in my arms? I need to do something, I thought. With no parents to turn to and no one to rely on in this situation, I couldn't work with a newborn, and even if I could, I had nowhere to live until my first paycheck. Then I remembered our savings account for the baby. I hurried to the bank, only to find a balance of 50 cents. Why? I thought, looking at the statement. Most of the money had been withdrawn days ago. The passbook was in the drawer at home, I realized. My husband knew the PIN. I was shocked that he would access my account. Did he never intend to raise this child? Dazed and carrying my baby, I found myself back in front of our old house. I could hear happy families and TV news from nearby homes. The news mentioned the passing of ABC Corporation's chairman and his vast fortune. Some people have money and happiness. What should I do? I have nothing. I'm sorry, Luna. How can I raise you? I whispered, holding her close. With less than $50 in my wallet, I knew we wouldn't last more than a few days. As night fell, I sat on a park bench with a roof, trying to keep Luna warm. In the morning, I'll try to borrow money from a payday lender, I thought. Just then, my phone rang from an unknown number. That call changed everything. Hours later, we were in a luxurious hotel room. Someone had arranged for us to stay there, saying, "I've booked this room for you to rest. It's paid for, and diapers and baby supplies will be delivered later, and I've arranged clothes for you too. If you need anything else, just tell the front desk." After a good night's sleep, I considered trying to reconcile with my husband for Luna's sake. But I couldn't imagine a future where he wouldn't abandon us again. I can't let my daughter be a victim of that man anymore. I need to manage on my own. I decided. I sent an email to my husband, and he called right away. "Hello, I saw your email. So you really want a divorce, right?" he said. "Yes. After what you've done, how could we possibly stay married?" I replied. Well, it's better for me. Getting rid of someone as useless as you," he said. Ignoring his cruel words, I arranged to meet him in the hotel lobby. The next day, my husband arrived at our meeting place, looking puzzled as I stepped out of the hotel elevator. "Isn't this a luxury hotel?" "What? You've been staying here?" he asked. "That doesn't matter, does it? More importantly, you'll divorce me, right?" I replied. "That's the plan, but how will you manage with no money?" he said, looking down on me despite being the one who put us in this situation. I deliberately answered coldly, "I'm inheriting a small fortune. So even without you, I can raise Luna on my own." "What?" He looked stunned for a moment. "Don't lie. You said you had no relatives." I thought so too, but it seems I was wrong. Suddenly, he eyed me suspiciously. Hey, is this inheritance substantial? Enough. Apparently sufficient, so Luna and I won't struggle in the future. At first skeptical, he seemed to believe me after seeing me stay at a luxury hotel and wearing a designer dress I'd never owned before. Then he gave me a sleazy look, almost licking his lips. Stephanie, why don't we try again? The child needs a father, right? What are you saying all of a sudden? Have you forgotten what you did? I have no intention of staying married to someone who changes his attitude the moment he learns I've inherited money. When I presented the divorce papers I'd prepared, he tore them up. What are you doing? I exclaimed. You're just trying to keep the inheritance for yourself, aren't you? He accused. Weren't you the one who sold the house and abandoned us? I retorted. I'm never divorcing you. Listen, I'll give you a week to reconsider. With that, he left abruptly. A week later, after ignoring his calls and messages, I agreed to meet him at the hotel cafe. He arrived late, speaking casually as if our last parting hadn't happened. Hey, Stephanie. Ready to try again? How could you think I'd change my mind after how we parted? I replied. Fine, then lend me $20,000 from your inheritance. That's nothing to you now, right? Even if I lent it to you, I doubt you'd pay it back. Don't worry, I'm now an employee of the famous ABC Corporation. Surprised? I can pay you back quickly. When did you change jobs? But that doesn't matter. The old company paid poorly. I switched jobs for my precious wife and daughter. I'm family-oriented, you know. His gesture of looking up at me was one he often used when we were dating to act cute. Back then, I fell for it, but did he think it would still work? You took the money from Luna's savings account, and you still need more. I shouted. Don't yell like that, he said. Of course I will. I don't even want to see your face anymore. Oh, I see. Fine, I'll divorce you. But you'll definitely regret it, he said confidently, giving me a bad feeling. Listen, we haven't filed for divorce yet. And you inherited property, right? That means it's marital property, so half of it is mine. I'm the one who benefits, he said, grinning smugly. But I had prepared for this over the past week. All right, I'll write up the divorce papers now, so make sure you divide the assets properly, he said. About that, first look at this, I said, handing him some documents. I never thought you'd been cheating since right after our marriage. Before meeting my husband last time, I had hired a detective agency to follow him, wanting to know why he had abandoned us. The investigation report revealed things I never imagined. Right after marrying me, he met another woman, claiming to be a single high earner. To gain her trust, he spent money on luxury cars and entertainment, going into debt to finance it all. However, when he finally couldn't keep up with the repayments, he sold the house and fled to his mistress. Why the hell are you snooping around? He yelled. I had no choice since I didn't know what was going on with you, I replied. It doesn't matter now that we're divorcing, he snapped, seemingly forgetting that he had torn up the divorce papers himself a week ago. I'll be taking $20,000 in compensation and $500 monthly in child support. At least this much, I stated firmly. Why should I? You had the kid on your own. I'm not paying a cent, he shouted. It's true that I got pregnant before we married, but when I said I wanted to keep the baby, he had definitely said, let's raise it together. Now, he was trying to blame everything on me. I absolutely couldn't forgive him. With all this evidence, you can't possibly think you can avoid paying, can you? I said. This is such a pain. Talking to you just pisses me off. Here, this is what you want, right? My husband signed the divorce papers I had prepared and lounged back on the sofa arrogantly. Well, you seem to have inherited quite a fortune. Staying in a luxury hotel and all. Yes, enough that Luna and I won't just be comfortable. We won't have to work for the rest of our lives, I replied. Great. Paying you alimony and child support is nothing then, he said smugly. Ignoring him, I called over the lawyer who had been waiting at the next table in the cafe and introduced him. Did you think I'd come alone without any preparation? I asked. Ha! A lawyer. But no matter who shows up, it's a done deal that I'll be getting your inheritance, he said confidently. The lawyer explained the situation to him on my behalf. As he listened, the color drained from his face. It can't be true that inherited assets aren't marital property, he exclaimed. No, it's not. In fact, the money from the house you sold on your own is marital property, and there's also the money for Luna that you spent. It looks like your payments to me will only increase, I explained. I signed those divorce papers counting on your money. There's no way I can pay that much. This time, to prevent the papers from being torn up, I had already had the lawyers securely store them. Then, incredibly, my husband lunged at me. That signature is invalid, he shouted. As the lawyer was slow to react to the sudden turn of events, a well-dressed man pulled my husband off me and pinned him to the sofa. Uncle! I exclaimed. I'm glad I made it in time to help this time, my uncle said, smiling at me. Actually, it was this uncle who had helped Luna and me when we were about to be left on the streets. That life-changing phone call that day. At first, it was the lawyer now beside me who had called, but when he brought me to the hotel, there was this well-dressed man. I'm your Uncle James. Yes, your eyes and nose somewhat resemble my brother's, he had said. Of course, I didn't believe their story right away. But seeing my suspicion, they showed me ID and documents proving our relation. I was truly shocked, having thought until then that I had no relatives at all and was completely alone in the world. Moreover, the lawyers said that my grandfather was the chairman of a quite famous company. Come to think of it, I heard the news about that chairman's passing when I was standing in front of our old home that day. I can't believe my father was that chairman's son, I said. Ah, yes, but their relationship was bad. Your father ran away from home and remained estranged. It seems my father always regretted that, my uncle explained. "So, grandfather left me an inheritance?" I asked. "Father always said he wanted to give part of his fortune to my brother too. That's why I've been searching for my brother all this time. He's gone now, but I want you, his daughter, to receive the inheritance in his place," my uncle said, bowing his head to me. It was such a sudden and unbelievable story. But with a baby in my arms and no option but homelessness, I had no choice but to believe it. In a dreamlike state, I went through the inheritance procedures, my hands shaking at the sum exceeding $1 million written there. At the same time, I felt relieved knowing I could safely raise my daughter. And even more than that, I felt tears flow, feeling as if my late father was protecting me and my daughter. My uncle handed his business card to my husband, who had just learned about my inheritance. "Excuse me, I should have introduced myself earlier," he said. My husband snatched the card and turned pale as soon as he saw it. "The current chairman of ABC Corporation." "I'm terribly sorry," he exclaimed. Yes, the news had reported the passing of the previous ABC Corporation chairman just the other day. And my uncle had succeeded him. I'm honored that you hired me," my husband said, bowing his head repeatedly as he realized who he had been facing. "Sit down," my uncle said. "Yes, sir," my husband replied. From then on, clearly conscious of my uncle, my husband's boldness visibly diminished. "You'll of course pay the compensation and child support you just promised to my niece, right?" my uncle asked. But since she inherited money, I don't need to pay compensation, right?" "Hey, say something. You'll forgive me, won't you?" my husband pleaded, turning to me. "Of course not. I'll make sure you pay every cent," I replied firmly. "If I pay what you're asking, I won't be able to do anything," he complained. My uncle addressed him. "If we've hired someone at our company who can't take responsibility for his own actions, I might need to have a chat with the HR department and your supervisor." "No. If you say something to my boss, I finally got this job. I can't lose it," he panicked. "It's interesting how you think it's fine for others to be in trouble, but not yourself," my uncle observed. I'm sorry," my husband mumbled. "I think you're apologizing to the wrong person," my uncle pointed out. Reluctantly, my husband bowed his head to me. "Stephanie, I'm sorry. Look, I've signed all the necessary documents. Can't you forgive me?" His strange pride seemed to prevent him from offering a proper apology. "I have no intention of forgiving you right now. You haven't made amends for what you've done," I said. "What do you mean?" "I've signed the papers and given you the divorce papers." "What more do you want?" he shouted. "The atonement ends when you've fully paid the child support and compensation," I explained. "Don't give me that crap," he yelled. "Stephanie's opinion sounds perfectly reasonable to me," my uncle interjected before my husband could say more, finally silencing him. If the payments are delayed, let me know. I'll make sure they're deducted from his salary if necessary." "I'll talk to HR about it," my uncle said to me, glaring at my husband. Then he left. As soon as my uncle was gone, my husband tried to appeal to me tearfully. I told him with a merciless smile, Oh, by the way, I told your mistress everything, that you're actually married and not rich at all. She said she never wants to see you again. My husband's mouth opened and closed, trying to say something, but in the end, he just slumped his shoulders, unable to utter a word. After that, my ex-husband was kicked out of his mistress's house, spent almost all his salary on compensation and child support, and was struggling to repay his debts. When he missed a payment once, the chairman, my uncle, personally visited his department for a thorough conversation. Since then, there were no more delayed payments. Moreover, this incident led to my husband being sidelined in his department, making his position in the company quite uncomfortable. As for me, I'm living peacefully with my daughter. With the inheritance and compensation, I've built a good relationship with my kind uncle and his family. My uncle is slowly teaching me how to manage the sudden wealth I've received. With our future secure, I plan to continue living